Hola a todos, mi nombre es Eduardo Molina, soy UX Researcher en Talana y les voy a presentar el próximo módulo. Tenemos un invitado especial, un invitado internacional que se conecta con nosotros desde Inglaterra. Me refiero a Architectures, un software revolucionario de recursos humanos que se ha desarrollado un assessment capaz de predecir desempeño observando directamente la conducta de las personas en un contexto de reclutamiento y selección de personal. Para esto, hemos invitado a Estelle Mccartney, Chief Customer Office de Architectures, desde el año 2020. Dentro de su trayectoria, posee 15 años en consultoría. Ha sido elegida una de las 100 Women to Watch por la Creator University. Estelle ha participado frecuentemente como comentarista sobre la diversidad, el futuro del trabajo y además, dentro de sus principales funciones se encuentra liderar la atención de clientes para asegurar que tanto candidatos como clientes tengan una experiencia excepcional en el uso de esta plataforma. Sin más preámbulos, les dejo con ustedes a Estelle Mccartney.
Hello, my name is Estelle Mccartney and I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Arctic Shores. It's my pleasure to be joining you today. And there's three things that I want to talk about and share with you in this session. Talking about the future of work and selection, talking about hiring for potential and specifically behaviour-based assessments. And then I want to share with you some stories and data from candidates and customers that we work with at Arctic Shores. But first of all, the future of work. The World Economic Forum forecast in 2019, so before the pandemic, that by 2030, 85 million jobs will be lost. So even before the pandemic, they'd recognised that there's an acceleration toward digitisation and the automation of tasks and advances in technology will change the roles and responsibilities in the workplace. On a more positive note, they also found that 97 million jobs will be created. And they also predicted that 50% of the workforce will need to reskill. So this is a massive shift for public policy, for government leaders, but also for business leaders and those working in talent management. Tradition dictates that companies hire based on a candidate's experience. But these changes in the future of work, where we have a more tech-driven environment and there are greater pressures to increase diversity, mean that there's a very limited pool of people with the relevant experience to fill these roles. And this traditional approach no longer works. What's more, by focusing solely on past experience and current skills, companies are either forced to pay rising salaries to the small pool of people or are simply unable to fill vacant roles, dragging down their ability to deliver as businesses and to grow. And failing to create diverse workplaces and the social and commercial benefits that arise from that diversity. Those companies that are hiring solely from that limited talent pool are leaving themselves at the mercy of the constant cycle of poaching, pushing up employee turnover. And none of this is sustainable. The future of work and successful companies, therefore, need new skills and to access a much broader talent pool. Yet, we see that most hiring for experience is the default. Most companies are still using the CV. Research that Arctic Shores carried out in the spring of this year showed that 70% of people working in talent recruitment said that the CV was the first step in their screening process. 98% said that at least some of their roles required experience. And 88% have screened candidates out of the process based solely on their experience. The digital economy will continue to create jobs, but as the World Economic Forum data shows, there simply aren't enough skilled people to fill those new roles. So we're not really seeing a skills shortage. What we're seeing is a skills mismatch. And it's a mismatch that will be here to stay if we keep hiring, however we always have, prioritizing experience over potential. On top of this, the traditional behaviors that many of us have relied on, sourcing talent from the networks that we have, through our family, friends, school, contacts through university, is not only flawed in relation to improving diversity or selecting the best candidate for the job, but as this front page headline from this weekend's Financial Times shows, it's now rightly seen by the court of public opinion as unacceptable practice. This front page story is a case in point where Boston Consulting Group, an international consulting company, flew the children of top partners into the UK for work experience. Rightly, they have been severely and publicly criticised for this. Now, this might be an extreme example and an extreme case in point, but it's evidence of how the world is changing for the better. So even if companies are not flying their kids into London for exclusive work experience, they're still clinging to the comfort blanket of the CV and focusing on past experience. For most, this is the current world of selection by CV, looking at these things: name, hobbies, recent experience. This is all loaded with unconscious or conscious bias. And what's more, the CV and experience are a very poor predictor of future performance in a role. And traditional cognitive tests introduce advantage for certain groups. But it no longer has to be this way. Potential-based hiring is a new approach that focuses on a candidate's likelihood of succeeding in a role based on an objective and data-driven measure of their personality qualities and cognitive abilities. Combining established neuroscience, psychometrics, and data insights with engaging online tasks, Arctic Shores enables companies to see and candidates to demonstrate true innate potential or transferable capability. So instead of looking at what school they went to or what experience they've had that's probably not relevant, these assessments can identify a candidate's potential in areas like time management, learning agility, problem solving, self-belief, customer handling, all traits or success criteria that are relevant to the job in hand. So let me share with you some details of how it works. Before that, I realise you might be sitting there thinking, feeling rather happy and proud of yourself and thinking, well, I don't just rely on the CV. My company is already using assessments to identify candidates. The challenge has been that by asking people about their potential, which is what most assessments do, it's not the best way to establish that potential. Sometimes people don't know that they have particular special qualities, while others are not confident in expressing them. Self-reporting assessments are flawed. They traditionally ask you a series of candidates. And as you can see from this diagram, each of those questions prompts an explosion of thoughts in the candidate, whether it's a question like, what's the right answer? What does this mean? What does the potential employer want me to say? What would I like my mum to say? So the experience is flawed. Arctic Shores has overcome this challenge. Combining established neuroscience, psychometrics, and data insights with engaging online tasks, we've overcome this and enabled companies to see and candidates to demonstrate their true potential. We draw on a wide body of neuroscience research. Our science team then builds and tests tasks that measure true human behavior. And this data lets you see how your candidates will naturally act and think at work. So you'll know just who you're hiring before you hire them. So how does it work? Our behavior-based assessment has been adapted from decades of neuroscientific theory. And as you can see, some of the early digital iterations of the tasks along the top of this screen here show how we've pulled them into the year 2022. We've had then to go back and retest to make sure that the validity and the reliability of the tasks still holds true. It works by understanding how certain tasks activate regions of our brains, and so we can link observable behaviors with their unique personality. We're really daring to be different. Our assessment measures a broad array of traits which span across cognitive capacity and the big 5 factors of personality. What this means is that we're following a widely accredited psychology model that's recognized and legally practiced within the world of psychometrics. And essentially, we're taking the new revolutionary assessment process and connecting it to the already established worlds of neuroscience, psychometrics, and psychology. And I've got a short video that I'm going to share with you now, which is going to explain a bit more about the science behind the Arctic Shores behavior-based assessment.
Arctic Shores assessments are based on neuroscientific tasks in development since the 1960s. They utilize game technology to gather thousands of data points on candidates' cognition and personality. This creates a modernized assessment process that is more objective. We've introduced game technology to modernize the assessment experience while staying true to the task's underlying scientific principles. Our apps capture data on users' behaviors and reactions as they navigate through various tasks and challenges. The immersive, gamified assessment environment puts users at ease, resulting in more authentic responses during the tasks. As an example, our Ticketmaster level, which is based on a classic cognitive psychology paradigm known as task switching, provides data used to generate a score of conscientiousness, a big 5 personality trait related to organization, deliberation, and perfectionism. In this task, users are required to quickly sort tickets by either the shapes or numbers they display. Individuals who are highly conscientious are less likely to make certain types of mistakes and are more likely to remain engaged in tasks with changing rules that require focus, rapid responses, and greater persistence, such as this one. Neuroscientific research has shown that this kind of task activates the anterior cingulate cortex, one of the brain regions associated with cognitive control and motivation. By understanding which regions of the brain are activated during particular tasks, we can make a link between observable behaviors and personality traits. Based on widely accredited research and the established practice of occupational psychology, we can then predict job-relevant individual differences based on these personality traits. For more information, visit arcticshores.com/science.
How can the BBA fit into your process? Well, there's 2 ways really. The first is early stage screening, where customers put the behavior-based assessment to work just after the application stage. And customers that have been doing this have been able to move resource that was previously applied on the manual, time-intensive task of sifting through CVs onto higher value tasks. The second place is in the interview stage. You can use behavioural insights from the assessment to support fair and consistent interviews from one hiring manager to the next. So we're moving away from gut feel or guesswork by hiring managers. So that's where it could fit into the process. What are the benefits of the BBA? I've got another short video just to take you through those. So in summary, the benefits around enabling you to measure what matters in an authentic way. Time and time again, we hear that the biggest challenge in talent acquisition is knowing a hire will work out before you commit to it. In short, seeing the true potential for that particular role. By measuring unique behaviour and natural strengths, our assessment paints that picture for you. So rather than relying on CVs that look to the past, you can look to the future. It also enables you to include every candidate, as well as engaging every candidate. I'm going to share with you in a minute or two some feedback that we've had from candidates who've completed the assessment. But before I do that, I just want to share a couple of more bits of information. The first is our job fit report, which every manager gets a copy of in advance of a candidate interview so they can see how that candidate has completed the test. And then just as importantly is the report that the candidate gets as soon as they've completed the assessment. This is one of the really unique things that candidates love about behaviour-based assessment from Arctic Shores, that as soon as they finish completing the assessment, they'll be sent a report. It doesn't tell them whether they've been successful or not in this particular role, but it shares with them some insights about their own personality, their own natural strengths. And time again, we hear how much candidates really value this compared to the experience that they've traditionally had, where they submit lots of CVs to lots of employers and hear nothing back. It creates a really nice connection with aspiring talent and is a really fantastic brand reputation add to the companies that use the assessment. So last but not least, I just want to share with you some customer and candidate stories of those companies who have already identified that the changing shifts in the world and the changing shifts in the workplace mean that they need to focus more on potential-based hiring. At Arctic Shores, our mission is to create a more diverse and fulfilled workforce, and one in which candidates have the opportunity to show their full potential and employers have the opportunity and the means to see that potential. We've been established since 2014, and we have been used in over 40 countries. For most of our candidates, we'll extract about 5,000 data points. Maximum is 12,000, but 5,000 is the average. And that's captured per candidate that enables us to identify those natural strengths. And then for those natural strengths to be assessed alongside the profile or the success criteria for a particular role. Just over 2.5 million candidates have taken the Arctic Shores assessment, and we're still counting. And we're fortunate enough to work with an incredible range of companies around the world. But back to that candidate experience, I mentioned to you that that was really at the heart of why Arctic Shores was set up. The feedback we get from our candidates is really exceptional, and particularly when compared against more traditional cognitive or aptitude tests or self-report tests. 89% of candidates in our latest survey felt more relaxed when completing the Arctic Shores assessment. 93% enjoyed completing it as part of the process, and 90% felt more excited to potentially work for the employer having completed that assessment. So just a flavour there of the candidate, that all-important candidate experience. And then just to finish up, a few bits of data from some of our customers. So insurance giant AXA have been using the Arctic Shores assessment for a number of years, and particularly using it in their call centres. They conducted some analysis and calculated that they'd saved £2.4 million in just 12 months by improving the fit of the candidates that we're bringing into the business, and therefore pushing up retention rates and reducing staff churn. And they described that success as phenomenal. Next up, our customer Siemens, the engineering giant, who had a real challenge with attracting or progressing female candidates through the interview stage, and understood that some of that was probably because of bias, unconscious bias in their traditional approach. They started using our assessment, and they found a 100% increase in female representation at the final interview, and a 65% increase in assessment centre pass rate. And last but not least, our customer Leighton, who are a French international consulting firm specialising in innovation funding, they saved 90% of their hiring costs, and they invested that into other more high value elements of their recruitment and their employee experience and their candidate experience. They achieved in 1 year a 25% increase in diversity by using the assessment rather than the CV. And they found that those successful candidates that they'd selected really were a great fit, and the potential that had been identified using the assessment then came into good use when they started working. And they got those candidates into a productivity curve 3 times faster than they had done previously. So I hope these stories speak for themselves, and that the last 20 minutes or so have given you an insight into the whys and the hows of potential-based hiring, which are that they can empower you and your company to tap into much broader, much deeper, much more diverse talent pools. They can help your hiring managers move from gut feel and unconscious bias and a bit of guesswork to objectively measuring what matters. You can free yourself from those inefficient and ineffective processes to accurately and objectively screen candidates in seconds. And that can help to catapult the business from a world of ever-aspiring salaries to a sustainable pipeline of high potential talent, so that every day, every hire can be based on potential rather than experience. Thank you.
Well, Estelle, thank you very much for that presentation. I can say that the public was really interested in all that you just said, and they asked a couple of questions. Is it okay for you to answer it?
My pleasure.
Okay, let's go ahead. The first question that our attendants do is how traits are measured through the assessment. Question, of course.
Of course. And that is, of course, the fundamental difference between the Arctic Shores behaviour-based assessment and traditional self-reports. And I hope that the video that I played during my presentation explained a bit of that in more detail. But essentially, Eduardo, our assessment rests on sort of one scientific principle, that personality is born in the brain. The difference between your personality and those of others around you are simply a product of how your brain functions differently from the person that might be sitting next to you. And so by adapting established neuroscience tasks into the kind of the engaging, intuitive format that is in the Arctic Shores assessment, we can then measure those differences between people, between two people, in a way that then speaks to their unique behavior. You know, that there's no right answer in these tasks. There's no, A answer and pass answer and fail answer. All that we're doing is looking at the way that the candidate approaches, tries, and completes the task. And so by putting all of that insight together, we get a really nuanced picture of each candidate's natural strengths. And then it's that we're measuring, again, on their potential fit for a given role or a given company.
Very, very interesting how the technology is evolved to that state. The next question, can all job profiles do it, like do the assessment? What about the more older people or those who have a greater digital gap? Do you understand that concept?
Yeah, no, I do. I think there's sort of a couple of parts to your question, I think, Eduardo. I guess the first one is around the sort of general fairness of the assessment. So I guess I would start by saying, and you won't be surprised to hear me say this, because I spoke about it a lot in my presentation, that the CV and the traditional way of assessing candidates is so unfair and so full of bias that compared to that, an Arctic Shores behaviour-based assessment is a huge improvement on that, a huge leap in fairness. And of course, it's a legal requirement for us to comply with guidelines around diversity and inclusion, which we do. And, we've done an analysis of this based on the 2.5 million candidates that have taken the assessment, and there's not been any adverse impact on age or gender or ethnicity. But I think the second element of your question, Eduardo, is around potentially sort of older people and their use of technology. And I'm sorry to do this, Eduardo, but I'm going to say, I'm afraid that you're demonstrating some unconscious bias in the very nature of your question. Do you know which age group has the largest percentage of people using tablets?
I have no idea.
It is the 65 plus age group.
Oh.
So I think we've got to be really careful when we're thinking about older people and making assumptions about their digital capabilities.
They are doing better than we think.
They absolutely are. And of course, as well as our team of neuroscientists and psychometricians and business psychologists and developers, we also have a team of user experience specialists. So of course, we're thinking about how do we make sure that the candidate journey throughout the whole process, not just when they're actually doing the assessment, but as they read the instructions, as they get some guidance, we're trying to relax them. The most important thing that they can do, and it's a piece of advice that we give to candidates before they start the assessment, is just be yourself. And that's part of the beauty and the uniqueness of this assessment. And so, we find that, candidates enjoy it. It's much fairer, and that there isn't a particular bias or challenge for older people. And of course, as you know, Eduardo, we also have a support team on hand at Arctic Shores. So if any candidate does need some additional help or has got any questions, they will be supported throughout that process.
So take away the belly button decisions and do the better for the hiring process.
Exactly.
Good. Estelle, the third question, is this to have a methodological validity and reliability?
It absolutely is. Yeah. I mean, we wouldn't be able to work with the companies that I shared some of them with you in the presentation without having achieved that standard of validity and reliability. And we fully adhere to standards set by the British Psychological Society, the American Psychological Society, and the International Test Commission. And of course, through the work of our amazing in-house neuroscientists and psychometricians and data scientists, as more and more candidates take the assessment, we're constantly interrogating it, improving the user journey. But yes, it absolutely does have the validity and reliability. It's not just and we need to maintain and meet those standards to be working with the likes of PwC and Accenture and KPMG and all of the prestigious organizations that we're very lucky to work with.
So you have their certification and you also are improving by the time.
So we meet all the standards. So we meet all of the standards set out by the organizations that I've listed. Yeah, absolutely. And we are constantly refining the assessment, but I would emphasize that the neuroscience and the psychometrics that are used in the assessment are based on very established tests and methodologies and approaches that are well known and well reviewed and well respected in academic organizations. And the rigor that lies behind the assessment is absolute, and it has to be for us to, as I said, to work with the sorts of organizations that we do. Just one thing to add, I'm not sure it's bedside reading for everyone in the audience, but there might be some people who are really, really, really interested in all the technical elements of it. And we publish our technical manual. So if anyone is looking for a good holiday read, they're more than welcome to a copy of our technical manual.
You have your technical manual, of course. Okay, this is good to know, Estelle. Thank you very much for all that information and all your presentation. I think we all learned a couple of new things with the technology and all the process of selection team. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me, and I'm just hope to see you soon.
Of course, we are going to see you soon in UK.